Well, a new study from Pew Research has shown just how badly young Americans are being impacted from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, according to the results, roughly a third of young Americans aged 16 to 24 are neither in school or working. So for more on this, we're joined now by Amanda Barroso. She's a Pew Research senior writer. So Amanda, nearly a third of young Americans are disconnected in some way from work or school. But to put this into context, I mean, how does that compare to the figures before the pandemic fully hit?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So to give you a little bit of context, a little bit of comparison, as of June 2020, we saw the highest disconnection rate on record for young people ages 16 to 24. That was the 3 in 10 number, the 28% that you just cited. And again, this data has been collected by the census since 1989. That was the highest June number on record for this age group. In 2019, that was 8 points lower. So that number was hovering at about 20% for 16 to 24-year-olds. So we definitely see a spike. June numbers are interesting. This is when a lot of kids are, school's ending in May and June. And so we do tend to see a little bit of a spike in June, just in terms of enrollment going down, kids not going into summer school, that kind of thing. But this June is particularly striking in that it's still high, even when we compare it to last year's number.
Right. I was just about to ask you how much of this increase can, be tied to the pandemic. And how much of it is tied to just, the cyclical nature of school, that children are already not going to be in school after May?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think to maybe get at some of that, we got to go back to like March and April of this year, when usually students are fully enrolled in school. And what we saw was in March, there was a youth disconnection rate of about 12%. And then April, it jumped to 20%. And so what we know about that time period in terms of this COVID context is that this is when a lot of those virus-related lockdowns were kind of going into effect. We started to see that impact of lockdowns on job loss. And so I've had colleagues at the Pew Research Center write about this, about how those lockdowns have affected young people in particular. We saw they were one of the groups hardest hit by some of these virus-related lockdowns. So I think that those March and April numbers, at Pew, we're not in the business of speculating, but that is really important context, I think, for seeing that increase from 12% to 20% just in a month's time.
So when you see these numbers, is there a concern, because a kind of light bulb went off? I thought about the 2008 financial crisis, right? We always talked about how hard hit millennials were by that crisis and how long it impacted them afterwards in the recovery. So I saw a number like this, 30% impacted school and work. I mean, what does that say going forward for the education outlook? How many industries are going to be impacted by so many younger folks that have no jobs now, or graduated and there was no jobs waiting for them, or for students ending high school that, the end of their high school looks very different from when you and I were perhaps finishing high school or going into college, and they did remote learning through the rest of the year.
Right. I mean, I think that this disconnection rate is something that we can keep our eye on as researchers, especially as we're approaching the fall. It might give us some insight into what those college-age students what kinds of decisions they're going to make about enrolling in the fall, especially freshmen. Generally, this measure, the disconnection rate, is used to kind of assess youth well-being. So the higher the disconnection rate, so the more young people who are detached from work or school, those are like huge, social institutions that we have. We see those as sort of negative indicators. And so I think as we move into the fall and kids are making their decisions about enrolling in college and that kind of thing, it's something that we need to keep our eye on as researchers.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that interesting, results and from that study. Amanda Barroso, Pew Research senior writer.
Thank you so much, Kristin.